Hey world, welcome to Keats Universe. Today I am talking about a topic I probably should have discussed quite some time ago, but now that more layers of this issue have been revealed, now is as good a time as any to delve into this issue. And that is the issue of the far right attacking the freedom of speech of the LGBTQ. So the far right are renowned for justifying their hate speech by screaming freedom of speech from the mountains. But there's a contradiction with that, and the contradiction with that is it's all one-sided. The vast majority of the far right don't really care about freedom of speech at all. They care about their freedom of speech and not the freedom of speech of all. Now, while there are certain exclusions to freedom of speech, such as yelling fire in a crowded place, defamation, calls to violence, and the rules of private establishments. Meaning, for example, if a retail store ejects you from their premises for either being bigoted to a fellow customer or a staff member, you can't sue them for violating your freedom of speech. But apart from these very basic and very reasonable parameters, the idea of freedom of speech is to be able to freely express your ideas, your opinions, in either a verbal or a literary format. This should not be exclusionary for certain groups. It is for all citizens or all humanity if you want to embrace a wider interpretation of the humanist model of freedom of speech. Unless you are inciting violence or attempting to defame a particular individual, you should not be punished by law for having a particular view or expressing your speech in a particular manner. This is why banning books should not be an exception to the rule. Be these books LGBTQ themed or promoting critical race theory, they should not be banned. The publication and availability of these books should be protected under freedom of speech. The same goes with Storytime Hour with drag queens. There should be no exception allowing to censor this form of expression, which would therefore be a violation of freedom of speech. Now, I know the right loves to falsely claim, that the LGBTQ and those who support us are basically grooming kids. Some even go as far as to falsely accuse us of being pedophiles, which is essentially the resurfacing of the very ignorant and very false belief that homosexuality and pedophilia are basically the same thing, which they are most certainly not. But when it comes to books, if you were honestly trying to claim that reading particular books will turn you gay or trans, you're out of your mind. Firstly, in terms of one's sexuality, that is part of your biological makeup. So a book cannot turn you gay, bi, pan, or even straight. That's not how it works. The only group of people who ever even tried to groom children into a particular sexuality are far-right Christian extremists. And they did this, or tried to do this, through gay conversion therapy, which I and many agree was brainwashing. Now, not only was it brainwashing, not only did it have very severe mental health consequences, it incidentally never worked. It never actually changed anyone's sexuality. Now, sure, there are people who may claim this may have caused somewhat of a change. Those people are doing nothing more than denying their true nature, repressing their nature, and denying themselves the chance of happiness due to repression. But the bottom line is, you cannot change or choose your sexuality. It is not a choice, and it is not something you can learn from reading a book. Gender identity is similar in the sense that you cannot forcibly alter one's gender identity. It is intrinsic to their personhood. Any attempts of the use of conversion therapy on trans individuals resulted in the very similar negative consequences that we have seen when this very same procedure was performed on homosexuals. To put things in another way, most books, TV shows, movies, etc., when I was growing up as a kid, were purely heteronormative for the most part. There were very little gay characters in TV shows, movies, and books when I was growing up as a kid in the mid to late 90s. And yet, for some strange reason, that did not groom me into becoming straight. So I have to ask the question, why would stories and movies or TV shows involving gay characters or gay romances be any different? Now, to elaborate somewhat more on the drag queen storytime hour, this is quite often mischaracterized by the right. They tend to liken it to a drag show you may see in an LGBTQ nightclub or a burlesque show. But the reality is that is not what drag queen story hour is at all. These events are totally PG friendly. They involve no profanity whatsoever. It is simply a drag queen reading a PG friendly book to children. That's it. That's the extent of what the right are apparently so shocked about. The fact is, this notion that the LGBTQ are allegedly grooming kids is a fabricated notion pushed by the right. It is nothing more than a dishonest excuse to justify their homophobia and transphobia, because the older and more classic arguments for being transphobic and homophobic just don't work anymore. Not that they ever truly did. And a lot of these older pro-bigoted arguments were just downright unscientific. So what do they do instead? Well, they just make up nonsense. They defame the LGBTQ. They call us groomers. They call us pedophiles. They throw around accusations left, right, and center without a moment's thought to what exactly they are saying, or if there is even any credibility to what they are saying at all. And the reality is, there is no credibility to what they are saying about us. It is all fabricated. It is all lies. Because this is a group of people who do not care about the truth. They don't care about what it is true. They only care about attacking us, attacking minorities. To them, it is only an us versus them. That is all this is. When it comes to the rights, it's almost like they have a villain for every season. Unfortunately, it is trendy amongst the right at the moment to hate the LGBTQ. It's almost like they got bored with being Islamophobic, so they decided to turn their hatred back towards us. They always have to find someone to hate. They've got so much hatred and negativity in their lives. Back in the 2010s, the right had this disturbing obsession with feminists. Every edgy video on YouTube was these edgelords hiding behind cartoon mascots, preaching the most anti-feminist and misogynistic nonsense imaginable. But then they got bored after a while and started attacking trans people for some reason. Now, that is not to say that Islamophobia and sexism are no longer a problem, because, oh, they are. But it seems to me presently there is much more focus and energy from the right directing hatred towards the LGBTQ. Things have become so intense with the right that they are not only beginning to disrupt businesses, they have resorted to acts of violence and acts of terrorism. Now, some of you may already be familiar with this news story. I'd be very surprised if you're not, and you're somewhat active on the internet, because this news story has been all over social media. An LGBTQ ally who is also a store owner in California was gunned down by radical right-wing extremists, all because she refused to remove a pride flag from her store. Libraries are receiving bomb threats for simply carrying LGBTQ books, or in some cases, they're not even LGBTQ books. They just happen to be books who happen to have characters who are gay or trans. This is the very same mentality, very same acts that the far-right conservatives did through the 70s and 80s. Only back then it was abortion clinics. See? Different villain for every season. And what I mean by that is the rights have historically always tried to villainize everything and everyone they don't agree with. In that they mischaracterize, they misrepresent minority groups, they spread lies about them, they spread propaganda, because we are the villain of that particular season. Because they have tried to villainize us, they have tried to paint us as the enemy. But the reality is they are their own enemy. Because they are not friends to equality, they are not friends to progressiveness, they are friends of isolation, they are friends of division, because that is what they do. They divide and they create inequality. The unfair treatment of the LGBTQ needs to be called into question. The right should not feel that they have a right to bully us, to threaten us, to murder us, to slander us, to silence us, to push us under a bus and get away with it, or to be under any impression that they should never have to face consequences, because of course they should have to face consequences. Because none of this is okay. Because discrimination is not okay, because lying is not okay. And I do understand that certain people, certain minorities, including the LGBTQ, you may not feel safe to speak out. But for those who do feel safe to speak out, please speak out. Let your voices be heard. We should let these bigots know that we are not prepared to allow fascists to win or to overpower us. We have the right to live our true and authentic selves. We should never have to feel less than. We should never have to feel ashamed. We should never have to feel we should have to apologize for our existence, because quite frankly, we have nothing to apologize for. Thank you for watching, and with the sentiment of humanism in mind, may I remind you that we are one. We are human. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to check out some of my previous videos, and also feel free to follow me on my social media, including Mastodon and Bluesky.